Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We have a special guest today, Letladi Sebesho. You want to say hi real quick, Letladi?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to come on. So, Letladi is a previous student. So, this is the first time we've had a student who have finished launch school come on the podcast. And I think his story is really interesting. So, first, he is from South Africa. And he has been studying math and computer science before coming to launch school. And he, what we call finish, so he got about halfway through the advanced side, and basically that's finish. We have so many courses that most people don't get through at all before finishing, and ended up getting a
Sure.
job afterwards. So I wanted him to take us through that journey, that from beginning to end, and then getting the job at the end. So first of all, Leilani, I wanted to understand a little bit about your background. So growing up in South Africa, what was that like? And also how you got interested in programming and eventually how you found launch school, or why did you come to launch school?
Yeah, I think growing up in South Africa was like probably growing up anywhere else. It's a good country, uh, fairly politically stable, so everything was good growing up. I got interested in programming around 2012 by accident, actually. I think I was out of school at that point. Actually, I dropped out of college, but my parents wanted me to continue with college. Basically, they forced me to register for another program. So I went to the university where I was gonna be registering for a program, and I just chose computer science. And then there was a
Just
friend of mine
randomly,
who,
did you know what computer science was?
yeah, I did know what it was. Actually, I had other options. I tried to register for engineering, but that was like midway through the year.
Okay, so it wasn't random.
And
It was you had this inclination towards, it sounds like, engineering, math, computer science.
yeah, I tried to register for mechanical engineering actually. But since it was midway through the year and they only have year courses, I couldn't really register. So the next best thing was computer science. And then after that, I got a Java book from a friend of mine. I think I spent like 6 months going through a book on Java, and then I wrote the Java certificate after that 6 months. I thought I would get a job by then,
So
but
you
yeah,
actually got the Java certification after 6 months of studying Java.
yeah, like 6 months of studying it full time, like just doing nothing else, just
Okay.
reading that whole book. Yeah.
And were you going taking classes now? Your parents forced you to go back to college, right? It sounds like. And
Yeah.
at this point, were you also taking college courses or just studying from a book?
Yeah, I was studying because this is like a part-time university. So it's long distance learning. They send you material and then you write exams at the end of the semester.
Okay, so you
So
were
I
doing
think
both. You were kind of studying on your own and going through the school curriculum.
yeah, that's what I was doing. So I was doing Java on my own and doing C++ plus plus for the school curriculum
So how long did you do that for?
for probably 2.5 years. I think for me, I was always more interested in working than in actually doing the program. Basically, I would always have my own curriculum on the side and study my own things.
So you did this for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And what happened at the end of 2.5 years?
I got a job as a junior developer. I think around 2015, I like developed that's when Meteor was like the the big thing in the JavaScript world. So I developed a simple boilerplate, and then I went to a meetup, Meteor meetup. I presented the boilerplate, and then I got a job offer from one of the guys who was there as a
Yeah.
junior developer. Yeah,
Yeah, so you just off of that experience alone, you got a job. Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so you're working as a developer now. Is that the end goal? Or how did how did you, or why did you look for something like launch school? I assume you were still unsatisfied in some way, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, uh, I could never really develop applications on my own. Like obviously, every time I would read a book on programming, like throughout that 2 years, I read a lot of books on developing applications. But when I sat down to actually do something on my own, nothing really happened.
So even though you took 2.5 years of a computer science program part time, you were learning on your own. and you were
Hmm.
working as a developer. All these things on your resume would seem like you're a programmer, right? But somehow you still felt that that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and especially I think working on when I was working as a developer, the 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 kind of work I was doing and the kind of work that my boss indicated that I was going to do
Hmm.
was getting more complicated, and it was becoming, above my head in a way.
Hmm.
So that's when I decided to basically leave my job and go into law school full time. I just didn't feel up to the task of.
So first of all, how did you find us? How did you find Launch School? Were you looking for just additional training programs? Did you ever think about maybe going back to getting like a master's program or finishing out your college degree?
I think I found law school throughout that 2 years when I was busy studying and reading books. I obviously found law school and other programs, but back then I was not working yet, so I couldn't really afford to get into it. And then, for some reason, I think around November 2015, I got an email saying you guys were updating your curriculum, and so that's when I got interested in going back to law school. So it came at just the right time for me.
Okay, and so then you started Launch School. You quit your job and then you just went to do Launch School full time? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I actually got another part-time job, and then I decided let me do law school for full time. I thought it was gonna take me 3 months, but yeah, it took longer than that.
Yeah. How long did it end up? It almost took a year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you went through most of our courses and what we consider basically the finish line, although we have a lot more courses even beyond that. But about halfway through the advanced integration frameworks phase,
Uh-huh.
um, and that took about almost a year of full time work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And how was that journey for you? Did you experience a lot of maybe anxiety? Did you ever feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a job after this, or were you pretty confident in that, you already had a job, so at the worst case you can always go back to that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think for me, I was just being blown away like throughout the whole journey, like at what I was learning. The beginning courses from preparation to the back end courses were a little bit easier for me because I had read books on Ruby in the past and
Hmm.
like learned different languages and so forth. So those were challenging. Like I was learning a lot in those phases, but they were not a lot of work, I would say. But yeah, I like after every course, I felt like my skill was getting better and better. And then after the front end course, which was like the backbone course where we do MVC and whatnot, I think that was the first course where I was really challenged, especially by the assignments that we were given.
And that's
I'd
funny
say,
because you had already had exposure to front end development, like with Meteor, for example, and yet you were still pretty challenged, I guess, in the front end section.
yeah, yeah, I think that's the thing about it as well. Sometimes when you're working, you're just putting stuff together, but you don't really understand why certain things are the way they are.
Hmm.
So, so I think that first MVC course was the first time that I think I spent the whole month probably on that whole course, like doing the assignment and
Yeah,
so
and that's
forth.
full time, right? That's maybe 40
Yeah,
hours a
yeah,
week or something like that.
and that's working full time. So it was a hard course for me to finish and to go through the assignment. And I think after the more when you go to the advanced courses, it becomes more important to finish the assessments because that's when your knowledge gets solidified as well.
I want to maybe talk about helping people compare and contrast the computer science courses that you took in your
Hmm.
studying, and how
Hmm.
that compares or complements the courses at Launch School. I get this question a lot, and
Hmm.
so having had exposure to both, maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think this computer science courses a little bit like the self-study I was doing, except obviously they have specific books they want you to read. But at the end of it, I don't think you'll be competent enough for the job market in most cases. And I've actually seen this because I've spoken to a couple of guys who had graduated from the same university that I was in, but they were not at the level that I'm at after launch school. So, for example, they're still applying for junior jobs and getting junior jobs, and I'm more intermediate and senior at this point. So I think that's the difference. Like after launch school, you'll be readier for more uh, more senior roles, and then after the computer science degree, you'll be ready for more junior roles.
Yeah, most of the time what I see is that now every computer science department is different. So it's
Yeah.
hard to generalize, but I'll give it a shot at it anyway. When talking to other folks who come from a computer science background, when they come
Hmm.
to launch school, and also just knowing when I was in school, which was many, many years ago, computer
Yeah.
science programs tend to also try to prepare people to be computer scientists, right? That's one of the
Yeah.
goals of a computer science degree,
Sure.
is to prepare people for those who want to go to graduate school, or
Hmm.
even go into things unrelated to application development, let alone web application development. For example, robotics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or anything related to software, which is too wide of a field. So therefore, it has to be very foundational.
Yeah.
Whereas launch school is more focused on application development and software engineering, and
Hmm.
of course web development. And so all these things are almost a subset, right? A subset of that. Like
Yeah.
we don't teach people how to work with VR
Hmm.
applications, for example, virtual reality
Hmm.
applications at launch school, right? But a
Yeah.
computer science program may.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
So they have to be a little bit more theoretical. And so the end result is that sometimes you'll end up with people who actually are far more prepared for these application level jobs if they go through a program like Launch School.
Yeah. Sure.
Sounds like that was your experience too.
Oh,
So
yeah. That's definitely an experience.
yeah, good. So after you finish Launch School, after another
Hmm.
basically year of studying with us at Launch School, talk about your interview process. What was that like? You said that you were applying for basically intermediate jobs at that point.
Oh, yeah. I think in South Africa, it's mostly just the job market is mostly junior and senior. That's where most of the jobs lie. So I was applying for those jobs, and I think I applied for a couple. There's two where I had to do a couple of assessments, and for the specific job that I got, I had to basically build a little React application. And obviously, in law school, we don't work with React, but I just picked up a book, went through it, and then basically submitted my application. And the interviewer told me that first of all, I was the only one who submitted my application on time, and the only one whose application was actually working
Hmm.
perfectly. So it's from that alone, I got the job.
Yeah, that's interesting. So now let me kind of give you a setup question a little bit. So you picked up this React
Uh-huh.
assessment. First of all, how long did they give you? Did they give you like a week to turn it around, or
Yeah, it was about a week.
about a week? So in that
Yeah.
week, you read a React book, and then you were able to fulfill the requirements of that project, right?
Oh, yeah, they gave us the assignment on about Thursday, and we had to submit it on Tuesday.
Okay, so a little bit less than a week.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I want to ask you: is it because you're just really good at learning programming languages, or is it that the foundational skills that we cover in launch school helped, or maybe a combination of both?
Probably both, but I would say it's more of the foundational skills we learned in law school as well. Like, I was actually surprised by how much, like right now when I read, for example, about frameworks and whatnot, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but I basically get the basic ideas of what is this framework doing
Hmm.
and what kind of problem is it solving. So I think there's that deep understanding that you develop in law school. I mean, for example, in the job that I'm at now, we were using Redux and we were using Redux Saga and all those technologies. And I think I was very comfortable in that space because of everything that I learned in law school and like the fundamentals of what do frameworks do and what is their purpose and whatnot.
Yeah, you learn the problems that all these frameworks are trying to solve. And so when a new framework comes up, all you have to do is evaluate that framework's trade-offs.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so you don't have to spend time analyzing or trying to understand the problem because you understand it really
mhm,
well, right?
yeah,
And I think that's the key. And one thing I always try to tell beginners or people who are just getting into programming is, have you noticed that
mhm,
whenever a new framework comes out, the next day somebody is writing a pros and cons about that framework, right? That happens
yeah,
all the time. And
yeah,
so that person didn't learn that framework in 24 hours,
sure.
right? Or
Yeah,
they did, but they didn't learn it. They didn't have to learn it from the ground up. They quickly dived into the areas where this framework is different than what they know.
mhm,
So they can just do a diff, right? They can do a diff and look at the
yeah,
changes and say, oh yeah, this framework is solving this problem in this way, and it's making these trade-offs. And so therefore, in my opinion, I like it or don't like it.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that was the biggest surprise for me as well. Like when I was learning all these frameworks, like I was surprised by how easy it was to pick up different frameworks, to pick up different approaches, and understand like why these approaches are working the way they're working.
Yeah, and I'll mention too is that the employer who interviewed you was so impressed by your
Hmm.
performance that they actually reached out to us and basically said, "Are there more of Leiladis out there in your program?" So,
Okay, that's cool.
so, and yeah, and I'm happy to say that's at that point in time that was the first time that happened, but since then that's been happening more often. So,
Yeah, sure.
so definitely, I feel like if you are able to focus on fundamentals, you're able to focus on one level layer below the framework and focus on fundamentals.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's really the impressive thing, and it allows you to learn things much quicker. And even when you're given a project that of a framework that you have previously not worked with, like React,
yeah, sure.
it's okay, right? It's not the
Yeah.
end of the world. So that's great. So I that's all the questions I had. I'll end it with a couple of generic questions that I ask everybody. Do you have any advice for
Mhm.
those early in the launch school program, or maybe just early in their programming journey? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I would say definitely plan very carefully, especially financially. Like plan your finances very carefully as you're going into it, and also don't waste time. Like once you get into it, like really get into it, and don't goof off along the way. I think for me, I only started picking up speed like towards the end when I wanted to get a job. Like that's when I was starting to like dedicate more hours and working night and day and so on and so forth. And then I would say if you can, you should do it full time. Like I think that's the easiest way to finish quicker and just be immersed in the material.
And also maybe because you said initially that you thought it was going to take 3 months, and so
Yeah,
if you come with that expectation, it's almost like if you plan your finances for 3 months, but
yeah,
then you quickly realize that this is not a 3 month program, right?
yeah,
How can you make plan for finances and still be open to allowing yourself time to learn? For example, in your case, I mean, it took you over 3 years, right? When you
yeah,
left college, you went back to look at a computer science degree. That was 2.5 years there. Then you
yeah,
worked for a little bit. Then you came to launch school, and it took another year. So this
yeah,
entire end-to-end journey, I mean, that's over 3 years.
yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I would say definitely, like just make the estimate more on the long side. Just plan to be at launch school for a long time, especially if you have never programmed before and never learned programming before. It's probably going to take you longer.
Yeah, and I like what you said about picking up speed in the back end, because this is what I noticed too, is that actually most of the time is required in the beginning. Maybe not in your case because you had that computer science background, but
Yeah,
for most people who don't, they actually spend most of their time in the first couple courses here. And then when
yeah,
they
yeah,
get to the more advanced section, things start to fall into place a little bit more and they're
yeah,
less stuck. So, in some ways, the first couple courses are some of the hardest if you have very little programming background.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, anything else? Any other advice or final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just like to say, I think this is the best investment one can make in themselves. I think that's what I tell. There's another junior developer at work who just recently joined us, and that's what I've been. I think he's doing the prep course currently as well, and that's what I've just been telling him that you know what, like this is gonna open so many options for you a year from now. Like once you've been through this course, and I think you'll be more in demand. You'll be more confident about what you can do, and you'll be able to do uh, implement the ideas that you have. So I think this is the best investment I've made in my own life by far. So I definitely like to encourage other people who are maybe still considering signing up or whatever, that it's definitely worth it and it's going to pay back itself many times.
Well, thank you for saying that. And definitely, I didn't ask Leilani to say that. We're not paying him
No,
or
no,
anything,
no.
so I just want to have that disclosure. So, sometimes I feel like these conversations are they seem
I planned.
too planned. Yeah,
Yeah,
and definitely not the case. But
yeah, sure.
yeah, thanks for stopping by the podcast, Leilani. I know it's getting into the afternoon over there in South Africa, and thanks for spending a Sunday afternoon with us.
My pleasure.
Okay,
Thank you.
have a good day. Bye.